everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful Monday you are enjoying on your time zones, or maybe even early Tuesday as well. It is always such a joy and a privilege to welcome you into our conversations. Now, today we will be talking about designing effective onboarding and how is this meaningful to an overall employee experience. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa working her magic backstage, so please do make sure you say a big thank you for her wonderful work as well. And as we will be getting ready to welcome the speakers on the screen, I would just ask people in the audience if you can just drop a few comments, maybe just let us know where you're watching us or listening to us from. And that would be a great, great sign that technology is up and running. And also, you will be helping us traveling the world vicariously through your notes. Now, Jessa, if you could just bring the speakers up on the stage, and as they settle into their Zoom boxes, I will just let everybody know. I see the comments coming in, so thank you so very much, Andrew, from Orange. Jordan, Courtney, always great to see you. Please, everybody in the audience, consider the conversation open to you just as much as it is open to our speakers. Use the chat generously, use it as your own conversation space, and do let us know your thoughts, your stories, your own experiences with employee experience. And that is, first and foremost, a wonderful, wonderful way to help our community grow through learning from each other. And second, it is time and time again such eye-opening and heartwarming to see all the nuances of the topics that we address. There are geographical nuances, cultural nuances, generational nuances, and we always bring our own journeys into the conversation. Now, let's try to make the most out of a very, very short hour today. And we are here to talk about designing effective onboarding. Now, what I will do, I will start us off with a very, very short round of intros. And the first challenge of the day, it will be rehearsal for the wrap-up mic drop round as well. If you were to boil down the impact of an effective onboarding into one word and one word alone, what would that word be? We take verbs, adjectives, nouns, adverbs, anything goes. So a very, very short introduction and one word that expresses the impact of an effective onboarding. Now we will go clockwise. Sandy, is always such a joy to have you on our panels.
Hi, nice to see you again. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Sandy here, HR manager, and I've been doing HR for a little bit over 20 years. And the word that I would say would be belonging.
Belonging. Thank you so very much. Debsy, good to see you. Welcome. It's been a while since we shared the screen. It's good to see you.
It's good to be back, Manola. Thank you so much. I've been in HR over 20 years and seen a lot of onboardings across a number of organizations. The one word I think is enriching.
Could you just please, I don't know if it's just me, your audio is a little bit hiccupy, and I missed the word.
The word is enriching.
Enriching. Thank you so very much. Enriching. Neha, it's good to have you here making this panel so wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's my first time, so excited to join this group. Neha Singla, my pronouns are she, her. I've been in the people and talent space for over 15 years, and the word, gosh, y'all had such amazing words to use. I'll say connection. I think I saw that in the chat as well, so I'll go with connection as the one critical word defining an effective onboarding experience.
Thank you. Now, before we go very, very deep into discussing onboarding, I would just ask for a few minutes of your time and energy to set the wider context for employee experience. And if you were to define employee experience through the lens of your own personal journey through HR, how would you go about it? How would you define employee experience for the purpose of our conversation today? And I will just let the question there, and we will consider this rehearsal for the unmuting competition. So just jump into the conversation as inspiration strikes. Employee experience, what it means to you.
I think for me personally, it's that every critical juncture of the employee life cycle, and I will spend a lot of time talking about onboarding and what defines onboarding, like when does that process begin? So anytime you start engaging with an organization and every experience you have as an employee, be it, hey, I've accepted the offer, I'm excited about day one, I'm meeting my new manager, I'm moving from one team to another team, I'm getting promoted, even within a role, the different junctures of my experience of leading a critical project, getting kudos for it, or going through a performance review cycle, my everyday experiences sitting in a meeting. I think it's everything you experience at work and occasionally outside of work, because I personally do think about work even when I'm turned off of work. So
Thank you, Neha. Such great points. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. Um, for me, I would say I would add because Neha had very good points to it, right? And so I would just add regarding the onboarding, it starts with the very first interaction, the very first one, which is submitting the after they submit the resume, what response did they get from us, right? So every single touch point, every single interaction is very critical and important when it comes down to the process. Feeling like they are accepted, like they belong into the space, right, into the company. I think that is another critical part that goes hand in hand with what we are talking about as well. And just how easy do we make it for them? How welcoming, are we warm and fuzzy when we have somebody come on board? And like Neha was saying, like even throughout the promotion aspects of it, let's say for example they interview for they interview for an internal job, but they didn't get the job. Did the manager that didn't select them, did they have a conversation as to why? Do we help develop them, to get them perhaps to that role, later on, once that particular job becomes available again? So I think those are some key things to add to it.
Thank you. Depti.
Yeah. I think Sandy and Neha touched upon a lot of those key elements. The overall experience, do they feel like they're, a part of the organization? Do they feel empowered to be able to make that difference? Are they getting those opportunities to be able to create that impact? I think all of that is so critical when you're doing your onboarding. Are we constantly looking for opportunities for them to shine and grow? Becomes critical.
I would like to pick up some conversation candies that all of you dropped throughout this first round of answers, and I really loved what Neha pointed out, that it's not just what happens during the working hours, it's also what happens outside the working hours. And I got reminded, I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm running out of English and it's just Monday. How good leaders, they say I serve 5,000 employees, and great leaders say I serve 5,000 families. So the next question is, when you think about effective onboarding, how do you outline this moment from a timeline perspective? So when does it start? When does it end? And also, for lack of a better word, what's the span of impact that you have in mind? And Neha, since I'm building on a point that you made, I would ask you to be the pioneer on this one.
yeah, and I think for me, the answer to that is ever evolving based on my experiences or feedback that I hear from other employees. I think where I'm at today, and again, open to input from others as well, is building on what Sandy was saying, is it starts from that first engagement. I may demarcate a true onboarding experience from, let's say, a candidate experience. For me, the onboarding is more about, okay, now it's a partnership that we're both agreeing to. So more like hey, a verbal offer has been made, I'm accepting your offer. Now what's the clock has started. Now let's talk about what experience you're creating for me if I'm the new hire. Because I think it's pre-day one when there is equal amount anxiety and excitement that you have about starting this new opportunity. So the more frequent and clear communication you have, that for me creates for a positive onboarding experience. And yes, we can get into the depths of the day one experience and so on. And I've worked at organizations of different sizes and at different stages of growth where I feel like, hey, what's the end point? That can vary from, let's say, up to day 60, up to day 90, depending on that size and stage of company. The more information you have to absorb, the more people you have to connect with. Perhaps it's a longer onboarding experience. If you're in an early stage company, perhaps that onboarding experience is a little tightened because there's limited information to absorb and a higher desire to jump in and be an active employee of that organization. And I feel like that clock starts all over again in some capacity as you change jobs within an organization. So that to me, pre-day one, from when you sign an offer to about day 60, day 90, is that onboarding lifespan that starts again if you're moving teams or taking on a different role even within an organization.
Mm.
And I will just add on to that. And sometimes it's not just the what is it called, the type of job where you put a timeline, right? Because even within a company, some departments require for the timeline to be extended, right? I worked at a company that for a particular job, it took the employee to get fully up to speed and fully understand their role 6 months. And so, realistically, how are we navigating through that? What are our checkpoints when we're going through that, right? Are we checking on them every week, every month, however, we're doing it? And for that particular role, we did know that 1 out of 3 would not make it because of how much it went into the role. So I think also being very, very transparent and empowering our recruiters when we're having them recruit for a role, them being super transparent and saying, here's what you're expecting. Here's what, our culture is. Is it always, I'm a firm believer of actually being fully transparent. If we are having a little bit of a difficulty in our culture at that time when the person's coming in, if we're not sharing that, and that's the reason why they're leaving their last role, we're doing them a disservice, right? So being transparent, saying, hey, this is what we're going through at the current time. However, this is what we are going to get to, I think goes a long way for that candidate experience.
Great points again by Sandy and Neha. A couple of things from an India standpoint, and especially from regions where you have a notice period. Your onboarding actually starts right after the offer is given, and even go on to say in smaller organizations, it starts with how many people am I talking to? Are these the kind of people I would want to work with? And sometimes in a smaller org, giving them that visibility into the kind of team members you're working with is also a great starting point from an onboarding perspective, because they get to know who they're working with. And across organizations that I've worked at during that notice period in India, sometimes it's 2 months, 3 months that we're waiting for a person to come in. And how do we ensure that we are the employer that's on top of their minds and they're not shopping around for other offers? Bringing them in for a meal with their team members, sending out a welcome card, getting on calls with key stakeholders in the organization. There are all of these touch points that help you differentiate yourself from the others. We've even included welcome gifts even before they join us so that they know that, we're thinking about them. We also had an instance where a decision to move jobs is a family decision. And we actually had one of the leaders speak to the parents of a new hire who is relatively fresh out of college and joining an unknown organization. So we had our leader actually speak to the family members to talk about what the organization does. And that's when you really start to get involved in multiple aspects to make this work.
Hmm. Sandy, I would like to go a little bit deeper on some of the points that you made earlier, but with a bit of a spin to the question. When we think about designing effective onboarding, um, of course, that we want to make it meaningful. Yet, a meaningful experience is a profoundly individual journey. So, knowing that we cannot individually customize this experience, but at the same time trying to make it a one of the most powerful cultural statements inside of an organization. What are some of the given blocks that should be consistent? And what are some of the items that can be customized, maybe, I don't know, across functions, across geographies, maybe even across generations? So, what are some of the elements that drive the customization?
So I think your recruiters are your very, very first line of defense, and they are the face of the company. How they express, how you train them, how you have them, whether they're excited about the role themselves, right? The To me, a recruiter, the best way I can put it, a recruiter to me is a matchmaker, right? And we're matching them with the culture, we're matching them with the role, we're matching them with, we're trying to sell them, but at the same time, we also have to be very conscious of the differences that every candidate has, right? And so I think that one of the things that is beneficial is that when a candidate comes in, whether you're screening, whether phone screening, or even you're doing some of the screening via email, right? I think that you are getting to know the person. So if your recruiters from the beginning share the getting to know your audience experience, have that skill, which I think is a very crucial skill for a recruiter to have. That's where it starts, because the more they talk to the candidate, the more they're able to pick up on what they're going to need, and how they're going to be as a employee, right? If a particular candidate is asking you 20,000 questions, you know that perhaps they're going to be one of those employees that needs a lot of hand holding, right? Or it can be an employee that is going to be your top performer and they're asking all the questions up front because they're not going to need any guidance once they have all the answers, right? So I think that's one big factor into all of that. Some of the things that I think can be customized is, I would say, would be per position. Some of the positions, like I mentioned, require more time. So if you tell them, hey, for this particular role, we have a buddy system, right? We're going to check in on you every week. And so you already set the expectation. But however, for my administrative assistant, I don't have that same type of thing. So I think it really comes down to the role. It comes down to the requirements of that role. I think one of the other factors that we need to start taking into consideration when we are recruiting is being able to listen and read between the lines. Sometimes if the employee's asking or the candidate's asking you about benefits, that's something we cannot change. We cannot change the benefits that we offer, right? But it might be that the benefits is something that is super key for them. Maybe perhaps ahead of time, sending them the outline of the benefits that are offered. So I think it's just going that extra step for the things that that we cannot change. That has to be a one size fits all, versus the ones that we can modify. Or sometimes we say, well, this is what we're doing for this particular role. This is what we do, but you're telling me you need a little bit of an accommodation here because this will make you feel better. Talking to the manager and saying, hey, this particular candidate would feel better if we approach their onboarding this way. How do you feel about that? So it's just, I think it's a very interactive approach of things, right? The what is it called? The fixed things and the flexible things.
To add that, I recently did a course on neurodiversity, and the very interesting concept around that is universal design, where you look at in universal design, you look at how to be able to create things where you're asking questions. How do you like to learn? How do you like to do your paperwork? How do you like to engage with your team members? Just asking those questions, open it up for a conversation on what are the things that you can tweak to help this individual? What are the things that you will have to help them understand that cannot be tweaked? For example, you have to do all your paperwork. We cannot change that. But the way in which you do your paperwork is where we can lend support. And these are the various ways in which we can lend support to you. So asking the questions really helps. And one way I feel that the integration into the organization can help is we have an About Me section that we ask the new hire to fill out, which also talks about their own individual interests. And it could be playing football, for example. And we connect them to people who actually share that interest. So they're not only getting onboarded from a formal standpoint, but also integrated from an informal standpoint as well.
I think both Sandy and Deeply have made some excellent points. I appreciate from Sandy the emphasis on the recruiter being excited about the role. You're getting some kudos in the chat as well. And then this user-centric mindset as you're creating any experience, right? Just sort of thinking back to a recent onboarding experience I might have had, it's like, oh, there are instructions, sure, but what's in your head does not always translate the same way. And I'm left wondering, like, I need to complete this step, but I don't have the information to complete this step before I can get to the next step. It's like, oh, well, you can just put NA or something to that effect to complete that blank field, but you don't have to give the exact information. I'm like, well, that wasn't clear, and here I'm stuck on this step. So having that user-centric mindset and always being open to revisiting, updating that information is helpful. Back to your original question around, what are some fundamentals that you need to have and what are some optional or customizable aspects? I think I'll emphasize more the day one experience. I think in that, and leading up to the day one experience, is that clear, consistent communication that I mentioned and timely communication, because you're thinking, yes, I've accepted an offer. When am I going to meet my hiring manager? When am I going to get to know about my team? When am I going to get my equipment? So having clear, consistent, timely communication, I think, is a given. Getting me excited about the company. Yes, I'll get to know more about the role, and I've heard through interviews, etc. But give me a little bit more about what this company is about. What am I committing my next chapter to? And how am I, that word that Sandy used at the beginning of the session, that sense of belonging, tell me more, where I start to feel that, yes, I belong here, be it through the company mission, be it through the people I'm going to be working with, be it through just the culture that the company has. I think some of those elements to really get the new hire hooked and excited about the opportunity are some fundamentals. And then sort of the yes, what you can customize and build on is that role specific, team specific, region specific nuances that i'm gonna want to know, not need to know right away.
Hmm. I feel that there's quite a lot of energy to talk about who is involved in the onboarding process. We heard a lot about the role of the recruiter. We started to scratch a little bit on the role of the line manager. But my next question has two parts, which is a big no-no in journalism school. But I will survive with this guilt. So, who's who in the zoo of the onboarding process and what do they do? And the second layer of the question, and it was inspired by a comment, we tend to focus on the new joiners. What is there in the onboarding process for the existing members of the team that the new joiner joins? Because as we all know, any new team member makes it a new team all over again. So, Depti, I would ask you to be our pioneer on this one, and please lead us into this slice of the conversation.
Sure, Manola. Uh, who's who in the zoo? I love that statement. I'm going to add that to my conversations going forward. Um, there are so many people involved in onboarding, and sometimes you just have to orchestrate the whole thing. It can be an overwhelming experience for sure, because you're talking to the HR operations person, you're talking to the IT person, you're talking to a workplace person, you're talking to the hiring manager, you're talking to the buddy. It's just a lot of people coming together. Um, I think creating that structure is so important, so everybody knows their roles and they know how to smoothly transition it over to the next person. And at the end, feel responsible for that entire process working. It's just not about washing your hands off once your piece is done, but to actually circle back to the new hire and check did they have an overall great experience from an onboarding standpoint. I think that is critical. And I really feel the hiring manager, a lot of people will say, oh, HR should be the one who is spearheading this. But I think it is the hiring manager or the reporting manager who should be responsible for the end to end process, who should be there right from the beginning till the end to check and see whether things are working. And also, from a standpoint of the team members, that you said that every new hire changes the team, just giving everybody a heads up around, first of all, why did we hire this person? And I think that starts even before you get the person on board. Why are we opening this position? What is this going to do to help all of you? How is this going to reduce the amount of work all of you are doing, because you have another helping hand on the team? Or how is this going to enhance learning for the entire group? So setting that context is extremely important. And of course, talking about what every person in the team should be doing to make this person feel comfortable. It could be as simple as take the person out for lunch, even if you're not the buddy. Involve this person into a conversation. I've had instances where I've seen new hires sit by themselves for lunch. And I think that's where it's so important for hiring managers to really lead this conversation and the entire process.
I like what Depti said, and I would add how we can engage other employees as well is with the buddy system, right? And giving them the power to know how much they're valued because we're pairing them up with someone new, right? And so I think that's if you were chosen to be that buddy is because of the fact of your knowledge, your wisdom, what you have that you offer to the company. and what we feel that, perhaps you embody everything that the company has. So I think that's a little bit of a kudos to that employee that's chosen as the buddy, right? And I think that's a good way of making them feel that, they're engaged in the process. In some companies, again, depending on the role, we've had it to where before they actually start, they come and meet the team. If they're able to, whether it's a Zoom call, whether it's in person, if they're local, hey, you know what? We're gonna go to lunch as a team. Why don't you come and join us if you have time? Right? So it takes the pressure of the first day away in that sense. Why? Because they're kind of already familiar with the team. We used to do like little systems to where we would do like a fun facts, right? So we would get to know them in that way. So I think hiring manager, yes, I agree, has a big contribution here. I do think that we do still have to add the HR element in there. And the reason behind it is, let's say, for example, your hiring manager isn't giving you the best experience. They're not going to tell the hiring manager that they're not getting the best experience because they're receiving it from the hiring manager. So if we step in and we do a 30-day check-in, a 60-day or a 90-day check-in as HR, I think that also goes a long way with the process, and it helps them, and you ask them what has been working, what hasn't been working, what would you like to see? Why? Because when we have been at a company, and right now the company that I work at, I have people that have been here 15, 20, 30 years, 40 years. One particular individual, she just completed 50 years with the company this May on May 20th. So when you've been with the company for so long, we kind of get used to we get used to kind of how everything operates, and we don't always see things with fresh eyes, right? So when someone new comes in, they're able to give you fresh perspectives. So I think allowing that fresh perspective to come in, right? And if they're not comfortable with the hiring manager or with their lead or anything like that, it's good to actually have them be able to have somebody else they can talk to, and that they can share that, because that can help both sides grow and feel, for them to feel like they belong, that they're included, that yes, there might be new, but they already have they're a big part of the company. Their contributions are worth it.
Neha.
Yeah, I'll pretty much be repeating a lot of what was already said. I actually just love the question. I came into this wanting to share as much as I wanted to learn, and just this question of what's the onboarding of the existing team members is a new lens that I'm going to take away with, because you kind of sort of take that for granted. I feel I have in the past. So I just want to acknowledge that whomever asked that question, thank you so much for that. I think, yeah, to what Deepthi and Sandy were saying, there are it is the who's who in the zoo. It's a new hire, what role they're playing in being open and receptive and aware of their part in this entire experience. It's the hiring manager, the recruiter, the IT team, facilities, and having an ops coordinator, the buddy. It's just, it's multiple players, and that's where it gets difficult, really assigning who's the key owner of this. But I love the point that Deepthi emphasized. It's like, it's not just doing your part, but it's like, how does that part connect to the other part? So being aware of the entire ecosystem is super critical. And I think the about me piece that Deepthi was mentioning before as well, like, hey, not just for the new hire, but also for the new hire, getting an about me or some sort of a operating manual for everyone on their immediate team that they're going to be working with, especially the hiring manager. How do you like to communicate? How do you like to make decisions? How do you like to give and receive feedback? Those could be some core fundamentals that we understand about the new hire, but the new hire also gets to understand about the team. So if there is any flex that needs to happen, that can take place. And I love the points that both Sandy and Deepthi made about the emphasis on the buddy. I feel like that's something that goes for every role, and clarifying for the buddy, like what's in it for you? Why were you chosen? What do we anticipate you highlighting for this new hire? And that being an engagement, as long as both sides want and need it to be, can set the stage. And sometimes I've been in instances where like, why were you chosen as my buddy? Like, you either are new yourself, or sometimes that helps, or you're so distant from my role that you may not understand the types of questions I'm asking and why I'm asking those questions. So there has to be some thought put behind who is chosen as a buddy, both from a what and how perspective, I would say. And that doesn't mean that the hiring manager, now I've been in instances where it's like, oh, I've assigned a buddy and my role as the hiring manager is over, like now go deal with the buddy. It's not an or, it's an and for the hiring manager. So how do you make sure that you as a hiring manager are the first person, the first line of defense for making sure it's a positive onboarding experience for the new hire?
Thank you all for these wonderful, wonderful answers, and I just want to acknowledge Larissa for bringing that point into our conversation, and for being co-facilitator of this portion of our conversation. Thank you, Larissa. Always good to get these from the audience. Now, we are a handful of minutes already into the second half of our conversation. And I know there are people in the audience saying, oh, this is wonderful, wonderful, inspiring, but when are we going to talk about data and AI? Well, we will in just a few minutes. But before we go there, I do have a question. I was listening to our conversation and I was reminded of a point that came up in a few previous panels. And that was around how oftentimes when we talk about employee experience within HR, there is a sense that we're talking about an employee experience that happens to people outside of HR. And it does take a bit of intentionality for HR people to understand that they are just as a part of an employee experience as people from any other function. So I would ask each of you, can you think of a story or an example of what is the HR flavor of an onboarding experience? Is there something that makes it special? Is there something that can be done to make someone coming into an HR team feel all these wonderful things that we talked about? And I will give you a few seconds to think about this, just as I will welcome people who joined a little bit later. And in case you didn't see the info that Jessa posted right at the beginning, this conversation is being recorded. So if you find it inspiring and helpful, you can always go back and re-listen or recommend it to colleagues and friends, either from the same LinkedIn space that you are now enjoying, or from our platform. Now, HR flavor of the onboarding process. Who wants to give it a try?
I can talk about my own experience. Many years ago, I was hired to head HR for this organization, and then the person said, we don't have a lot of the things that you're asking for, but then you can come in and you can get it done. So one is, if you are in HR and you're getting into HR, it's a very honest conversation about what's working, what's not working. And you're part of the fold even before you've joined, because you can just say, listen, these are things that are waiting for you to come in and get it done. So it also helps people understand the why behind why you're hiring them, because it's obvious that there are gaps. It is also an empowering conversation saying, okay, I can come in and I can make changes. So sometimes I think it's easier onboarding HR folks and telling them, okay, this is what you're supposed to do and this is how you need to get it done, and have those enriching conversations, as opposed to when you have to be buttoned up really tight and get things done when it is another function. I don't know if I should say we sometimes take it for granted when people are coming into our teams, but because everybody's experienced these things before, it doesn't come as a shock to them. But yeah, those open conversations are a lot more effective, I think, when you're in that same function.
I think for me, it's also, yes, you take things for granted, and you're sometimes also extra critical because you've perhaps, you know what great looks like, or you know what could should be done. So I've been in situations where I'm like, oh, this was not a good experience. So let me jot this down. So once I'm part of the organization, I can have those conversations. Either I'm the owner and I'm going to have to fix it in my new role, or I can work with the key stakeholders to say like, hey, just here's an outsider coming in, fresh perspective, or just like actually very fresh in a timeline sense as well of my experience that I had. Here's where I stumbled. Here's all the good, because I'm hopeful and confident that there's definitely some good as well to amplify the good that's working, that really helped me as the new HR hire feel positive about making this decision. However, if you really wanted to make this a great experience where there might be some gaps and things we can consider about changing or improving.
I agree with both of you guys, and I think you guys have both made some good points. What I would add is one of the big factors for me, my very first HR career, I was already part of the company. However, when I was given HR to do, mind you, HR was not what I wanted to do as my career. It was what I was given, and it kind of every time I tried to go away from it, it kept pulling me back in. So I kind of give up at some point and said, all right, I guess I'm doing HR. But one of the big things for me was that when I was given HR, I was at the age of 18, 19, and literally my boss goes, here you go. You're now responsible for HR. You're sending me to trainings, right? You're sending me to some classes, something, right? No, you're smart enough. You'll figure it out. Giving part of the employee experience that I think is super key is not doing that to our employee. Not saying, hey, you'll figure it out. You got this. That's why we hire you. You're smart enough. You know, I don't think it's the best approach. So for me, I would say the best experience would be from the beginning. The recruiting process is very key. Being transparent, letting them know, hey, the recruiting process, it's going to be 3 interviews, 4 interviews. Here's what we have to offer. Here's what we do not offer. What is it that would make you happy at a company? And understanding and being very transparent to where, let's say, for example, if you know that the culture, when they're telling you what they're looking for and you know that it's not the right fit, don't try to force it. Let it be, because we want to fill that role so badly because it's been open for 10 days. I mean, for 100 days, let's say. We have to just get a body in there. That's the wrong approach. So, let's make sure that we sell the role to the right person, that we're, attracting the right person, we're placing the right person. Let's do them a service, not a disservice. So being very transparent from the beginning is super key. Day one, who are they meeting with? Who are they talking to? Who are they going to be doing trainings all day? Are they going to have some sort of break in there where they're going to be able to be like, oh my gosh, my brain feels so overloaded? I think that also is a big contributor to it all, to the experience. Are we just bombarding them with safety, IT, benefits, everything all at once? And then they walk away and they're like, ooh, that was a lot. I don't remember any of it because it was so much, right? So sometimes maybe bites, bite size sometimes it's a lot better and goes a long way. And then just the buddy system, and then just checking in and seeing how their experience has gone. Has it been beneficial? Has it not been beneficial? What are some, just like Neha had said, what are some things that we can improve on? And just being willing to make the change. Because here's the thing, when we interview and when a candidate interviews with the hiring manager, oh yes, we're open for change, we're open for suggestions. But when the suggestions come, are we doing anything with those suggestions, or are we just letting them go in one ear and out the other? So that goes a long way as well. Are we willing to truly do what we say we're going to do. And if not, just don't say it, right? Because that affects the employee experience.
Yeah. It makes me so happy to see that we have the second co-facilitator getting traction in the comments. So Monica, thank you so very much. Monica raised a question around effective onboarding for remote workers. And, you know, Monica, I see you, I see your question and I will raise you mine. How about remote workers that really make it difficult for a team across time zones? And I will give you the example of the team that I am currently part of. So I have a colleague in Sao Paulo in Brazil. I have a colleague in the US. I have a colleague in Singapore, a colleague in UK, and I'm based in Switzerland. So simply finding a time slot for our weekly team huddle comes with, you know, time zone conversions and, you know, how can we make it in such a way that it's not always 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. for one of us or 5 a.m. for another one of us. In CET, you know, it's quite comfortable for me either which way. But so how is onboarding effective for remote workers?
One big thing at the last company that I worked at, we actually did have that case scenario. In one particular department, we did have all 4 different time zones, but when it came down to the HR department, we did have Singapore. We had, you know, other ones where we had our weekly huddle and as well, and having to have those conversations to make sure that we were all on board and that all of that good stuff. What we would try to do is, let's say, for example, if we are going to have somebody join us at 10 p.m. one of those days, the next huddle, if we would actually rotate it so that it would actually not always be that same person that was at 10 p.m. right? So I think it's just kind of that manager that oversees that department, right? That would be so key and beneficial to saying, okay, this one is, you know, Susie's day. This one's, you know, Tammy's day to actually kind of give up some of their day and or their evening. But what would I think goes a long way as well is, let's say, for example, if they're going to be asked to do an hour call at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or whatever the case might be, also making sure that if their normal start time is 6 a.m., that we're not having them start at 6 a.m. that day, right? Let's give and take. Instead of starting at 6, you get to start at 7, let's say, right? Or something along those lines, to where, thank you for sacrificing an hour additional outside of your normal, you know, time frame. Here's an hour back of your day.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with taking turns. And again, I'm part of an organization that has different time zones: China, Europe, US, India. And there's somebody's time zone that is really inconvenient for the others, right? One is to record conversations. The other is for people who are in time zones that work to actually have a separate catch up, give them an update of what's happening, share perspectives of a meeting that they may have missed, just being that buddy throughout. And it doesn't have to be only during onboarding, because you're going to continue with the time zones irrespective. Just being there to be able to give your time and spend your time providing them with updates is also important. And I think flexibility is also key, ensuring that people have their family time before they jump on calls, and you're not dragging them in late night and then early mornings, and making it difficult for them to be able to manage their daily lives as well. And I think just from remote onboarding, I joined this organization at the time of the pandemic. Pandemic struck in March, I joined in May, and I was like, how are they even going to onboard me into a role where I'm supposed to be meeting people? So for close to a year and a half, I didn't meet a single person. But everybody took it upon themselves to ensure that I had the context, I was comfortable, I got everything set up much ahead of time, that it was smooth to be able to get onto an organization when I had no context or clue of what was happening. And I think everybody pitching in and making that happen is so important. And I think thinking through those processes really help, and being proactive about what are the challenges a person would face if they're remote, and coming up with guidelines, and even buddies and partners that can help them is also going to be effective.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think adding to it, sometimes when you have colleagues in different time zones, it pushes you to be more intentional about meetings. Like, does this really need to be a meeting, or can we work async and resolve the matter or make a decision? And also, you mentioned technology and AI. I mean, I'm appreciating where things are going in terms of just transcribing meeting notes, summarizing meetings. So if someone was unable to attend, they still have the information and the context. So the next time there's a regroup or their opinion is needed, they still have the information if they were unable to join a meeting. And it's that, like I mentioned, intentionality and that flexibility and inclusion piece that Sandy and Deepthi also mentioned, that whether it's onboarding, whether it's your everyday experience, how are you being mindful, aware, inclusive, that we all have different perspectives, and it could be from a time zone perspective, it could be from an experience perspective, but we're creating that inclusive environment for everyone. And that question around remote workers, I feel like sometimes it's easier if everybody is in person or everybody is dialing in remote, versus when you have a mix, it's like, how do you balance the needs of your audience who's right in front of you physically versus those who are dialed in? So that sometimes gets tricky. But again, back to what are some of those fundamentals you need everybody to know, and then what are those, like it was mentioned before, what are those processes or mechanisms you have built in to, on an ongoing basis, create that sense of communication, connection, inclusion, belonging, either through check-ins, a buddy, some nudges being sent or information being sent through Slack or Teams or whatever platform you use, so you feel like, yes, I'm a part of this.
I see great recommendations also coming in through the comments. So thank you everybody for contributing. And right there with you, Depti, I joined the company that I'm with at the moment, fully remote. I was still in Luxembourg back then. By the time I got to Switzerland, it was again lockdown. So it was about 5 or 6 months into my role. And we were joking with a couple of my friends who also moved jobs during the height of the madness. And we're like, I feel like I know most of the stuff, but I'm just so curious how tall everybody is in real life. So, we were like, I want to go to the office and, really see how tall people are. I would invite all of you. We're about 8 minutes away from saying a very painful and frustrated goodbye. I feel like we could go on for at least 1 more hour. What are some of the key data points that you use when you think about effective onboarding? Neha, and then Depti.
Yeah, I think having those checkpoints, as we've been talking about, right on day one, perhaps some information to gather about the pre-day one onboarding experience. I know a lot of companies do candidate experience surveys, but it's candidate experience survey plus like a pre-day one, since you signed the offer, what was your experience in terms of getting access to the portal, letting us know about your equipment, et cetera, et cetera. I typically have had a post day one experience survey, and then a day 30, day 90. And then in between, I'll also do some focus groups with new hires, some focus groups with the hiring managers, and then focus groups with those key stakeholders from different teams, be it IT, facilities, relocation if someone's relocating, and so on. So that helps me just get a sense of, and few key things I look for is, did you have the information when you needed to have the information? Was your, what was your connection with your hiring manager? Were they warm, welcoming? Did they help you learn more about the role, the team? Did they help you get connected to other key players that you're going to work with in this role? And then overall, how are you feeling about this decision that you've made? Are you excited? Do you feel that sense of connection and belonging and inclusion? So those are some data points I've leveraged, and I find, depending on, and that's such great input for me and my team to then continue to evolve the experience. It's going to be different. I'm not going to be able to get 100% satisfaction score from all new hires, but what are some themes that I'm seeing? And then also trying to analyze, are these themes different by function, by region, by level at which the employee is joining? There was some good chatter in the comments around, hey, if it's an executive or a senior leader who's joining, sometimes that experience can and needs to be different. So just being mindful of those different variations, even as you're slicing and dicing the data, can be super insightful.
Depti.
Yeah, a couple of data points. One is, does the person have a clear-cut charter in terms of what they're expected to do? Are their goals set? Are those goals smart so that they understand what they're going to be measured against? Is the 100-day plan structured? Check-ins and focus groups are the other. I think going beyond the data, like I said, I also rely on how engaged is this individual? When I look at them, are they talking to people on their team? Are they sitting by themselves during lunch, like I said in an earlier for an earlier question? Are they actually getting involved in conversations outside of their team? So those observations also help understand the story behind the data. And sometimes you have to look at those additional data points to decipher why you got a rating that you did get, because new hires sometimes don't want to be so candid about things because they're also giving time. They want to make their impression. So they are going to be a little hesitant. I think all of this helps understand a holistic picture apart from just the data points and the metrics from a survey that you get.
I agree with what both of the ladies said, and I would also like to add, are we noticing part of the engagement? Are we noticing that they're coming in early? Are they coming in late? Like you are able to actually really notice attendance patterns right away as well. If they are engaged or if they're not engaged, right? Are they literally, is it, that their time to leave is 5 p.m. and at 4:50, their bag is already packed, right? So, I mean, it's just looking at those factors. I think it's super key to be able to know what's working and what's not in that sense. And like like Neha and Depti were talking about, just those checkpoints, checking in, making sure, that you're checking with all the corresponding players that took place in that particular new hire process and seeing what the feedback is, and the things that perhaps are not working, discussing those and saying, okay, how can we fix them? What can we do? What can we, be willing to do better to be able to know whether it was successful or not?
I love all these data points, and I was thinking about some potential additional sources of inspiration or context for effective onboarding, and there were two that came to mind. One, anything that comes out from the exit interviews that can feed into a better experience for onboarding. And the second is any kind of trends that you can pick up from the performance review conversations in terms of, what is valued, what is looked for, and what is, encouraged, discouraged, and tolerated at the end of the day. Now, I would really love to have the wrap up round, and I would ask each of you, we will do counterclockwise. So that means, Neha, you will go first. Um, if you could leave a piece of advice, a piece of inspiration for our audience in one sentence, this is the mic drop moment. What would that be? I will give you a few seconds to think about, just so I can wholeheartedly thank everybody for being here, for taking the time and the curiosity to spend this time with us. Just to remind you that the Employee Experience series goes throughout the month of, we're in June already. It feels like after years and years of January, we blinked once and it's already June. So your piece of advice, your piece of inspiration and encouragement for our audience in one sentence. Neha.
All right. Wow. I think I'd say there's no clear beginning, no clear end to the employee experience. If we talk about onboarding specifically, it is that entryway into a new chapter of that employee's life. So, as creators, contributors to that experience, be open-minded, leverage resources, technology, information as much as you can, and have that user-centric mindset to make sure it's a positive experience. What worked for you may or may not work for them. So that's why gathering information from other sources can help you really provide for a holistic, warm, welcoming, connected experience for a new hire. So good luck. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Neha. Depti.
Think about the individual. They're assessing us as much as we're assessing them.
Wonderful. Sandy.
I would say be transparent, get to know your audience, and learn to read between the lines.
Sandy, Depti, Neha, thank you so very much for being here. So deeply and truly appreciated. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jessa, for taking such great care of us. And I hope I will get to welcome as many of you as possible again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.